All right, welcome back to the next installment in our Persuasion series, getting us ready for the class lecture. Um, this video is going to focus on the material that you will find in the course pack over here, step 3, how you can persuade the audience, and you can see the information right there. Um, what I will do here, I'm going to move over to a PowerPoint that I have for this particular talk, and we'll start it here because this is kind of what I want to focus on the most. Let me blow this up for us. So, when we think about persuading, there's different ways that we can talk about this, but I like to cover these items. First, understanding what persuasion is and when it starts. I want to talk then about the rhetorical triangle, which is sort of 3 key ways that you can persuade audiences, even if you don't know much about them. We'll then talk about some persuasive appeals, ways that you can try to use emotions maybe to get people to be persuaded. The immediacy and delivery, we'll hold off on that until the next video. But we will talk about fallacies and we'll touch on Monroe's motivated sequence. That will be another video as well. So let's get into what is persuasion. Actually, before we talk about what it is, I like to think about when it is, when it starts. So you've got this little baby here. Let's say this is a newborn child. And we all know, we've seen movies or we've been there in person or we've got a family member or whatever, where babies are born and then they smack them on the butt, they suck the nastiness out of their airway, and then babies usually start to do what? Cry. Just like this little person. I don't know if that's a boy or a girl, but this child is crying because, well, why? Why are they crying? I don't think that at this age, this child knows that they are persuading. I think at this age, this child is using its survival instincts to get attention because it knows it needs something. That's what persuasion is. Let me say that again. Persuasion is a survival instinct. We use it beyond the instinctual level, and we use it with a lot of thought that goes into it to control as best we can outcomes of situations. But at its root, it is just innate. This baby is crying because it wants to be back where it was. I mean, think about it. This is like if you have a roommate that's just a real piece of work and you're in your room, lights off, covers over your head, having the best sleep of your life. And then all of a sudden they come in, rip the covers off, turn the lights on, and hit you with a flashlight and a leaf blower. You know, I mean, that's what it's got to be like to be born. Of course, we don't recall, but it seems like that would be pretty traumatic. And so crying is a way of saying, help, I need something. Now, when the baby gets a little bigger, maybe they're this age here, this kid probably can't say, hey, I want this, I need that. But they can now identify things. They can make noises other than just crying when they need different types of attention, and they can point to things. So if you've got a baby, less than a year old, baby starts to cry, it's a bit of a guessing game usually. Is the baby hungry? Does the baby need to be changed? Is the baby cold? Do you need to burp it? Does it just want to go to sleep? Is it cranky? Who knows, right? But you go through sort of the checklist every time until you find something that works, hopefully. And then that's what you sort of assume was wrong. This guy can tell you. He might not be able to say, hey, I need my diaper changed. But he could be like, cry, cry, and point down toward his diaper. Right? Or he might be hungry and cry a little bit and be like, oh, yeah, I want something to eat. It gets a little bit better. Now we can persuade because we know we need things and we have a feeling that we need it. But we can also persuade more directly. Now, we get older. What about this young lady? She's on this bike. Let's say that this bike was something her parents bought for her. Now I want you to think about how she may have persuaded her parents to buy her that bike. We've gone from, I don't know what's wrong, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just crying because I need to survive, to, I want something and I think I can get it if I make noises, the right noises, and identify it, to this person who's on the bike saying, look, I might want to use some persuasion here to try to get my parents to buy me this bike. Doesn't mean that it's effective persuasion necessarily, right? We have all this weird logic as kids, and it's lots of times, well, I need one because they have one, or I don't want to be left out. You don't want them to laugh at me. It's not really a survival thing anymore, obviously. Some kids will use that vein and say things like, "We know you always want me to get out of the house more and quit playing video games. If you bought me a bike, I'd at least be able to go outside and ride around with my friends," or whatever it might be. So we are innately persuasive, but we learn to refine it as we get older. When we think about what persuasion is, not just when it happens, I think of it as an onion. And yeah, I've used this example for 20 years now, and then I saw it in Shrek 2, and they were like, "Oh, people are like onions," but it's true, people are like onions. And if you think about them as a cross section like this, cut the onion cut, you can think about it in terms of attitudes are one thing you might target about a person with a persuasive presentation. You might want to just change the way they view something in general or start to. It could be really insignificant. It might be like people who think recycling is, just for liberals or something. And then you tell them, well, you can make money off of recycling your cans. And they think, oh, well, hey, money's for everybody. So even if they don't like it, they don't believe it's something that's fundamental to our world, their attitude might change a little bit, and they might start changing their behaviors. Now, beliefs much harder to get to. Usually, it's not going to be one simple speech. I mean, if you think about beliefs, you often think of religion, like religious beliefs. So if you have religious beliefs, or maybe you don't have any and you're adamant about that, wherever you are there, imagine if somebody came into our classroom and gave us the best speech ever about why we should join this religion that none of us are a part of. Most of us are just going to say, wow, thanks, that was really interesting. A couple folks might want more information. Really unlikely in that one speech anybody's going to get up and be like, I want to convert right now. Maybe, yeah, it does happen sometimes, but it's pretty rare. And so getting to true beliefs in someone, changing those, it's difficult to do, and it usually takes a series of speeches. What's even more difficult to get at are values. This is like good, bad, right, and wrong. I feel like this is probably best exemplified by the Nazi situation in Germany back in the 1930s, where the German people weren't evil, murderous, natural people, right? This wasn't just something those Germans, they like to kill everybody. That was never the situation. They were just broken financially and civically, and they were easily manipulated by Adolf Hitler to change their values, not just their beliefs and attitudes about different groups, but the idea that it is okay to kill certain groups that previously they would have thought, no, but what did they do? They haven't done anything. And suddenly now they're okay to just, do what we saw in history. So values really tough to change. They're at our core. And as I mentioned before, behaviors, you might change those if they're easy to attain. If it is something as deep as Hitler changing people into killers, that's a behavior. But it's also a behavior to say things like, hey, if you save your cans and just spend 10 minutes, take them to the store, you can make 20, $30. Oh, okay, I'll change that behavior too. So again, this can be minor or major. What is not persuasion, just so we're clear? Persuasion is not coercion, and that's when you take away free choice. The prime example, as you see there, is sort of this bank robbery where someone has a weapon or the threat of a weapon. Give me the money or I'll kill you. Technically, that's a choice, but it's not a real practical one. Blackmail and extortion, also not persuasion. If people do what you want them to do because you threaten them or hold something over their head, that's not it either. Now, we won't probably get into these areas much at all, but I think the key thing for us to remember in our presentations is to be ethical and to be honest, right? We want to make sure that we're persuading people to feel a certain way about our topic, but we also don't want to use any false information to make that happen. All right. The next part of this is the rhetorical triangle. So I think what we'll do, I will continue on here with the rhetorical triangle, and then we will stop this video, and then we'll make another one for fallacies. So the rhetorical triangle is something that goes back to the ancient Greeks. This is from Socrates of, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle fame. The rhetorical triangle tells us that we have three key ways or three targets that we can focus on when we're trying to persuade people. Ethos, which is personal credibility, logos, which is logical sense, and then pathos, which is an emotional appeal to people. So the idea here is that you can't just use one of these, that they need to be together. They didn't call this the rhetorical triangle because it has 3 points and they thought, oh, 3, 3, that'll make sense. They called it the triangle because a triangle is only as strong as its weakest side. So if you don't know your audience, you don't know if they are much, or if they're mostly maybe motivated by ethos arguments, logos arguments, or pathos arguments. In other words, do they listen to people ethos because they're credible? So if you give them stats and cite a credible source, will that matter? Maybe they're motivated by logic. If you can just give them a scenario that makes sense with an easy to follow plan, they'll often do it. Or maybe they are motivated most by pathos or emotions, and you need to make them feel emotional, whether that's negative or positive or both, in order to take an action. And what we learn from Socrates is that if you have a weakness here, you break your triangle and it collapses, and it's not nearly as effective as it could be if it were all together. Now, there's a couple exceptions here. Just to go back, the key thing to remember is if you know an audience well, not just by demographics, but you know a group, let's say it is a group of university professors. Just with that knowledge, which one of these might you focus most on? Not that you should let any of the other ones go. I mean, I think the one I would focus least on is pathos, because you would think that for professors, we would care about ethos, personal credibility. So why are you credible to talk about this? Do you have good sources? And logos, logic, does it make sense? If you go to a group of children and you're trying to get them to brush their teeth, you might talk about, well, I went to dental school, I'm a dentist. Well, that's cool. They don't really probably care. Well, logically, it makes sense because as plaque builds up, it gets deeper into your gum line. As that happens, you're going to have to get that scraped out, and that's going to be like, what? My gum line receding? What? But if it's, hey kids, if you don't brush your teeth, your mouth's yucky and your breath's going to stink and nobody will want to talk to you. Right? That's a feeling, and it works because they're children. So knowing your audience and how they are persuaded can be a huge benefit, because then you can focus in on one of these, but not at the detriment of letting the other two be totally ignored. You still need to include them, or you risk the complete breakdown. All right, I'm not going to spend much time talking about logical appeals. All I will say is, for a logical appeal in our understanding of it, make sure that everything you're talking about to us makes sense. If we can't easily follow your presentation, it doesn't use the outline, it's not going to be very effective because we're not going to connect with everything you're saying. Also, if you have a plan for us to change behavior or to start to make a difference in whatever that you're going to advocate for, give us a real simple, easy to follow plan. Don't make it something that, oh, well, in 10 years when you're an accomplished professional, donate this money. No, start with right now. What can we do right now that we can see real progress and not ruin our day? I mean, it could be as simple as going into a website and educating yourself, or signing a petition. It probably, for your group, college students, not known to be wealthy, right? You're known to be broke, so don't ask for donations, that kind of thing. Emotional appeals, similarly, the idea here is that it's a good idea to include them, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to be sort of, what's the right way to say it? Fake, for lack of a better word. I know we're talking about being manipulative in a good or bad sense, but the idea here is that if you only give positive emotional appeals, people will think of you as, I think the phrase is blowing smoke, right? You're just saying that. You're just a kiss ass or something. But if it's just negative, then you're negative Nancy, right? We don't like that either. It's a guilt trip or something like that. So you want to mix these things together. One example is sort of the stop smoking campaigns that happened, the truth campaign. And so this one is sort of a fear-based appeal. And this is Terry from North Carolina. And in this video, she says, I want to give you some tips, as you see there. It's not about stopping smoking. She says, I want to give you tips about taking a shower when you have a stoma, which is, the hole they have to cut in your throat, in some cases if you have certain cancers or esophageal problems from smoking. And she said, you got to cover it when you're taking a shower or you'll drown, because the water will just get down in there and you can't clear it out in time. And so that was a real unique fear appeal to getting people to try to stop smoking. Other ones, more positive. Honestly, I give you this example because this is the one I used to quit smoking, this exact one. I was a smoker for about 15 years, and my resistance to quitting was because I like instant gratification. I like to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to push this button and get this reward. And that can't happen that way with cigarettes. You just really want more nicotine. And so this showed me, well, in 20 minutes, here's something to think about. 12 hours, here's something. 2 weeks. And I looked for these things, and then I saw them, oh, I can breathe a little bit better. Ooh, I do feel a little bit better. I could see that it was working, and I continued. So that's the difference between maybe a fear and a positive appeal. Appeals to things like pride, you may see things proudly made in the USA. That's an appeal to your pride as an American and try to make you more likely to buy something. Guilt trips, again, these can work if you add in a positive appeal, but this works with advertisements like, we'll watch a few of these later, but there's one for like Life Alert, and if you haven't purchased one of these for your parents, what kind of a kid are you if you have elderly parents? It's like making you feel guilty. They also make the parents feel guilty. So they're an equal opportunity guilt tripper. Anxiety, again, could be a really good one. I think we've talked about maybe this statistic as an attention getter, right? So, 1 in 4 college students have an STD, and then they talk about you don't know if you have it and all this. So, man, this one can really get people motivated, but you, again, need to give them something calming after you give them something anxiety-inducing to try to motivate them. Authority is another way people do this. This is sort of the 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this sort of thing. Again, if you think that will matter to your audience, and to most audiences it will to a degree, make sure that you are using that. You're citing your sources, and sometimes that builds in authority, which adds to your ethos as well. The last thing I'll say about persuasive appeals here so far will be refutation. Refutation is sort of the idea that if someone says, well, I think the world is flat, and you say, well, I don't think it's flat because we have pictures of it from space and it's round. That's a refutation. What you can do in persuasive speaking is, even before you hear an actual refutation from an audience member, think about what the most common refutation would be to what you're arguing. Then go ahead and address it. So if it's, I don't know, we ought to make parking free for students at Grand Valley. And students would love that. But let's say you're talking to faculty or administration. You might say things, you gave this great argument why it should be free. But then at the end you add in, and listen, I understand the concern some of you have. I know what many of you are thinking right now. This will be a huge loss of revenue for Grand Valley. But I want you to think about the revenue that we will gain when students decide to come to Grand Valley and not go to other universities they could go to because of our free parking. That will offset and override any losses we might have from parking permits. You see, and so now you've given them their biggest concern and you addressed it, got it out of their minds, so now they can go back to focusing on being persuaded. That's another great trick that you can use with any audience. All right, I will cut this video there. As we come back, we will talk next up about fallacies. They are everywhere, and you need to, one, be aware of them so that you're not fooled by them or wrongly influenced by them. And second, you need to know about them so that you avoid them and you don't use them in your arguments. That's next time. See you then.